everybody, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Blumira Briefings. This week, I'm joined by my teammates Jake, Mike, and Michael. It's a two-mic kind of day. We've got a few twofers in the episode today. It's been a busy couple of weeks, so this is a bit of a double-stuffed episode. We're going to try and get through a lot of what's happened, not just over the past week, but the previous because of the holiday. So without further preamble or ado, we'll go ahead and jump right in because we have several critical update stories for you this week. The first is an emergency fix released by Cisco for a root credential flaw in their Unified Communications Manager platform. This is a CVSS 10 vulnerability for a hard-coded root credential, or a static credential vulnerability is how I think that it was phrased in the advisory. Static user credentials for the root account that are reserved for use during development. This issue affects 15.0.1 through the emergency patch that they just released a few days ago, and affects installs regardless of their configuration, which you never want to hear. So immediate patching is necessary. They don't have a good workaround. This is definitely one worth paying attention to. There is some information in the advisory to assist you with checking the logs for unexpected root user activity to see if this has been exploited. We'll include details there on the advisory and the CVE page. I guess, as our kind of starting point to discuss, communications is always a big question in incident response plans. Given that this is a communications hub within the organization, what are some additional preparation considerations that folks may want to make in terms of having a backup plan for comms should something like this happen?
Yeah, this is one that, before we dig into the actual my answer to that question, this was one that I thought was interesting because they noted 15.01 through the emergency patch. So I did a little bit of digging to figure out how old 15.01 is and how long this might have existed in the product. And from what I can tell, based on some downloads I could find, it's not a super reliable source, but just from Cisco's website, I found some recovery download media that went all the way back to like December 2023. So this could be something that's been living in these Cisco devices for quite a while, scarily enough. So I thought that was worth mentioning. So yeah, definitely get things patched when you can. As far as alternate communication goes, this should be something as part of like a lot of people's incident response. This should be one of those things that you always consider, because even if your communication, it doesn't go down, like in this case, we're talking about communication being interrupted. But even if you happen to get compromised and a threat actor gets access to one of your communication vectors, you want to have like an alternate stream so that just in case they do have access to one, you are talking and planning and responding to the incident in another. Phones, maybe not so much. I think like it's definitely a case, but I think like that tip really comes through when nowadays we're working in Slack, we're working in Teams, we're working in all these other instant messaging platforms, or even email. It's like you got to make sure that like when this happens, you have an alternate communication, and you could even break down your instant response. If something goes down, we use this. If something's compromised, we use this other communication method. So it's all about just like trying to make sure you have these things set up beforehand, so you're not scrambling, and also it's kind of like an emergency like exit plan, right? Like when a fire goes off in the building, you don't want people to run around like thinking about where they're going to meet up. It's like communication is one of those things that you need to know beforehand and have it established beforehand, so that way, okay, we all work in Teams, our backup is going to be Slack. At least now you don't need to communicate that everybody moves to Slack. You just kind of go over and move to Slack and everybody meets up there. So it's definitely one of those things you want to get straightened out before something happens.
It's pre-cell phone event planning rules, right? You need to have the game plan in place. You can't assume that you're going to be able to handle it ad hoc.
Yeah, one of the most difficult things too is to like set up external comms that you've never used before during an incident. So like definitely make sure you have whatever backup solution or like a communication app that's the emergency plan installed and connected and shared and the group set up.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I noted here is that the advisory IOC recommendations were to take a look to see if there was unexpected activity in the root logs. I think the question that folks may have come to mind is, shouldn't there be a process in place to analyze or monitor logs for unexpected root activity anyway?
I think this is one of those, like, we all dream and hope for it, but like,
in a perfect world, it's our favorite phrase.
If we're being honest with each other, and if there's one thing I like being, it's honest. Like, this probably isn't happening all the time. In my experience, I've administered a few phone systems, and those systems are pretty rock solid once you get them set up. Like, especially the older Cisco gear. I actually really liked managing that stuff because it was very just dumb easy, and it never went down. So like, my opportunity to actually see any of those logs while I was working on that stuff was very few and far between. So I think this would be a case where you'd want to see if you can set up your assist log to send it somewhere else, somewhere that you are monitoring continuously, maybe a single pane of glass kind of area. But yeah, I think in most cases you're not going to be watching for that stuff. I think the bigger picture here that you want to keep in mind is even if you're not watching that stuff, there's a lot you can do to prevent an attack like this from happening, or at least barricading yourself a little bit more, because you could do things like A, making sure your phone system management is not publicly available. B, if you have it, obviously you're going to have it manageable inside your network, but keep it on a separate management VLAN or something like that, separated out from other user workstation networks and stuff like that. So on top of looking for root stuff that I don't think is going to happen as often, I think the bigger takeaway is make sure that you're doing the separation and the basic best practices as well.
Continuing in the theme of our twofers for this week, we have another Cisco story here about a max severity remote code execution flaw in ISE, the Identity Services Engine. Actually, two RCE flaws in ISE and the passive identity connector, ISE-PIC, both of which are rated 10 on the CVSS scale. The first CVE 2025-20281 is for insufficient validation on API requests, which would allow a maliciously crafted request to execute operating system commands as a root user. And the second one, 2282, relates to poor file validation, which allows file writes to privileged directories, both of which can have catastrophic impact. I believe we actually talked about this story in our last episode. We definitely talked about one of these Cisco stories in our last episode, but there have been updates and a increased emphasis in Cisco's advisory to be sure to patch these as soon as possible. The vulnerability here that we're talking about showed, or I guess put a spotlight on an oversight in API security. And I think it's not uncommon for API use or review before implementation to get less scrutiny than kind of a full application review or a vendor solution under consideration might. And I think, Mike, this is mostly to you, what are some tips for how orgs can better get in front of validating these API tools or doing some level of assessment on them before they are used?
Yeah, I think the first thing is literally just, if you're not using it, turn it off, right? Unless you are using it, or an integration you have is using it via the API. If that's the case, try to lock it down as much as you can, right? So with APIs, access to the API is one control you can start with. You can do stuff like VLAN segmenting, right? This is ISE servers, so these are going to be on your network somewhere, right? Don't just give access to everything. And use good network monitoring to understand what is connecting, what's allowed to connect, and then write your firewall rules appropriately. And then on top of that, there's plenty of free API scanning tools. There's SaaS tools, there's DAS tools. Most of them will scan APIs. You can also look at the swaggers and just kind of see what the APIs are doing and how the credentials are being used in the authentication methods. And most of them, especially servers like this, you can tweak some of them and only give API credentials to very specific accounts. Limit the API scopes that the keys are allowed to use. Right, it's just like normal hygiene stuff. But the biggest thing is just don't let stuff talk to it if you don't need it to.
Good general principle to follow. I would agree.
Yeah, and I think this is a good reminder too for people they can just do something as simple as like an Nmap scan, or even like I think some of the IP scanners too come with like port scanners and stuff too. So basically you're just looking like good opportunity to just scan your internal network, see what ports are open on what. And then just see if there's any API interaction with the tools. Like Mike said, I couldn't find anything like directly online before coming into the podcast recording, but I'm sure you could probably find an Nmap script that probably does all of this automatically, like queries ports and then figures out if there's an API running on any of them. And if it doesn't exist, that'd be a good opportunity for somebody to write one. But yeah, I think just understanding what's on your network, because the APIs just can't just exist out of nowhere. They got to be hosted off of something and on a port somewhere. So just scan your network, see what's out there. It's a good opportunity just to like take a peek and see what's going on with your network.
Yeah, the benefit of attack surface management, monitoring, and a lot of really good tools out there that do that, whether it's something you're paying for, something you could find on the web, tools that, just have this data available, like even like a Shodan or something is probably scanning your network anyway, whether or not you're asking them to do it. And so there's lots of opportunities to find this data out there.
A little bit more deja vu for us today. Google has released an emergency patch for a Chrome ODE, the fourth since the beginning of the year. And I believe the third that is related to the V8 Chrome JavaScript and WebAssembly engine. This was found and reported by Google's own threat analysis group and fixed in a Chrome patch that was released on the 26th, so right after we recorded our last episode. It's notable that the threat analysis group typically focuses more on nation-state attack activity, but Google hasn't disclosed who was targeted. The vulnerability has been added to CISA's known exploited vulns catalog. So kind of as always, when you see a Chrome update available, should probably be happening as soon as viable. It's really simple. They make it, kind of give you the heads up. You just need to restart the browser. And then also noted is that fixes should be coming soon for Opera, Edge, and a good half or more of the rest of the browser market that are built on Chromium. Anyone have thoughts to add here? We've certainly seen a few stories like this.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like every time I see zero-click vulns in Chrome, it's like, oh yeah, it's probably V8, and it's probably a type confusion bug, just because they exist, right? Like Google, I will give Google tag like huge props. They're great at finding these bugs. They find them all the time, and to that, like you should get used to browsers being patched very regularly. Most of them release weekly security updates at this point. So, if you're seeing that relaunch button in your browser, that's the browser saying, hey, it's been too long. We can't just restart this thing on you. Please restart it. Yeah. So, yeah, it's funny. I think I just saw yesterday that Android actually has a lockdown mode. And one of the things that it actually does is turn off JavaScript optimization, just because it's a huge attack surface. People love these bugs because, they can just put a browser, or they can put a site somewhere with malicious JavaScript, and it's, like a watering hole attack. All you have to do is hit the the page. Most of the time things won't catch it. Sometimes they will. but it's a very passive attack that will get RCE pretty quickly.
I think this is a good example, too, of the kind of balance in risk consideration of working with a broadly used tool that is more likely to be targeted for research and attack because it is broadly in use. Also, having more resources and developers able to research and continue improving it versus smaller projects that may have a smaller install base and less attention towards building attacks. But if they're affected by something like this, may take longer for an update to come out. So I don't think that there's a fast and loose universal answer to that. It does come down to the product and how timely the larger or better funded option in that equation is at timely remediation. But I think it's a good kind of example of how you're kind of always balancing between those considerations, right?
I just wanted to shout out Tag as well. I don't really have much to contribute, but they're a really cool, interesting group. And if anybody's looking for another resource to read, another blog to keep track of, they're not super noisy. They don't post super often, but some of their content is really cool and interesting. And a lot of the people that work in that group, they talk at a lot of different conventions and stuff like that too, and other podcasts. So you might see them here and there, but really cool group to keep tabs on.
Taking a look at our most changed trends of the week, and these are going to be based over the last 14 days that we're taking a look at, starting with threats. And these are as recorded from within the Blumira platform. We had a notable increase in remote shell via IPS. There were a couple of CrowdStrike appearances. Sophos general security event, suspicious OneNote attachment execution, that's ominous, failed SSH connection attempt, and a sizable increase in volume there. And let's see, number 6 there, key vault tampering within Microsoft. Jake, I know there's a couple that you noted here as interesting to call out.
Yeah, and the threats, the one that stuck out to me was the double extension file execution. Suspicious double execution. Suspicious double extension file execution. Man, that is a tongue twister. But yeah, this one's interesting because this is a relatively new detection. This was something that I actually made probably about a month or so ago. And this was in response to some of the activity we've been seeing with just threat actors trying to disguise their malicious payloads as something else. This one in particular I looked up, and it looks like it was being disguised. It's a zip.exe, which may or may not be malicious. I've seen some zip files do that as well for whatever reason, but at least it's a red flag that you can kind of take a look at. And some virus, like antivirus solutions, might not catch something like that, but at least you've got the red flag here to do the investigation and kind of dig a little bit deeper. But this one was super interesting, especially zip.exe file in your downloads folder is suspicious and worth looking into.
I'll give a shout out to Jake, who there's a recent video you can also find on this channel where he walks through and demonstrates a double link extension file attack within Windows. That was a great kind of walkthrough and is totally pitch free. It's just to borrow, to malappropriate a quote from Dragnet. It's just attacks, ma'am. There's nothing in there except the information on that type of attack. And I think he does a great job of walking through it. So definitely that's one worth checking out if you've got a bit of time and are curious to learn more about that.
Yeah, that one was fun. We do have a separate dedicated detection for that as well. So there's 2 different versions. This is the double extension file execution, and there's one specifically for the LNK execution, shortcut stuff. So,
great.
Yeah, both of them were very similar, just depending on what kind of attack the person was going to go for.
Looking at our suspects, longtime watchers may not be surprised to hear that right up at the top of the list is remote access tool detection. This one is a Screen Connect alert for file transfer. Then there's a fast reverse proxy process creation, remote task list lookups, a suspected web shell interaction, and closing out our top 5, there is a Power View recon module. And Jake, you called out that Power View line item.
Yeah, that one I wanted to shout out just because it's not something that I think most people would be aware of. It's just another one of those tools that's used here and there in attacks, also red team engagements if you're having to have a pen test. But Power View is like a component of the bigger item, which is Power Exploit. So Power Exploit is like the overarching thing that's like hosts all of these different modules, and Power View just happens to be one of them. Power View in particular is used for discovery techniques, so it kind of replaces a lot of those like net commands or a lot of those old school commands that we see just through command prompt, and replaces them with more like different PowerShell options, which can sometimes fly under the radar because not everybody's looking for that kind of stuff. The other ones I wanted to mention in this list too was Tor browser usage is good to find some operational red flags. We don't see a whole lot of threat actors going on a machine and downloading a Tor browser and using it. It's usually users doing stuff they shouldn't be doing or trying to get around like particular firewall rules or something else in your environment. So that one might result in more just like slapped wrists, but at least you can say like you have got some tracking for it and keep an eye on it. And then the last one I wanted to talk about was the fast reverse proxy, also known as FRP if you go to the GitHub page. And this is really just an open source tool. It's abused by threat actors. There's some telemetry on that, so we know what's happening. And from the GitHub page directly, it's explained as it allows you to expose a local server located behind a NAT or firewall to the internet, which I don't think I need to explain too much why that's bad. But yeah, so threat actors will use it to kind of take something that's internal and then make it so they can access it externally, and it's pretty damaging.
I like the I think the Tor one here is particularly interesting. I myself have been at a lot of companies where you could have certain browsers and you could not have certain browsers. I've never tried to start Tor on any of my work computers, but I definitely a good one to flag. I imagine the IT person there was
just block it at the firewall. Like if you're running an org, unless you depend on Tor, like there's no reason you shouldn't block it on the firewall. Just like for compliance reasons. It will make your life easier, I promise.
Yeah.
I mean, back when I was in high school, that was a staple. Like, just get Tor, and then you can do whatever you want. I'm sure that doesn't work anymore. I mean, some places I'm sure it does, but yeah, it's
like I can only imagine. Like, you're doing a SOC 2 audit, you're in the office, and everyone's coming through, and like the people are looking at laptops. You better lock your screen when you walk away from your desk. Like, someone doesn't lock their screen, they left up Tor. Like, what is that SOC 2 auditor thinking that day? Like, that's going to be a weird conversation with your CISO.
Yeah, Tor exit nodes are like, it's like an IHOP at 2 a.m. Nothing good happens.
Cannot summarize it better than that. That's perfect. Looking at risks, we've got a G Suite external document share. Just a reminder, risks are just as it sounds like. These are activities that or events that could represent risk to the organization, but doesn't rise to the level of a higher confidence rating of a suspect or a threat designation. We've got mass deletion of Microsoft 365 objects, update of application consent policy, also within 365, SharePoint, 50 or more file copies within 15 minutes, and a indicator of disabling MFA in Azure AD on an Azure AD user. Anything stand out in this list?
I did have one highlighted that came in at number 7, which was just like Mike had mentioned a couple of minutes ago, was a Tor exit node. So this one was Microsoft 365 login from Tor exit node. This one I wanted to shout out just because, I mean, we already talked about Tor and all sorts of weird stuff around Tor, but I thought this one was interesting because it actually utilizes one of our threat feeds as part of the detection. So we have a threat feed that monitors for like Tor exit node IP addresses, and then it just watches for anybody who's logging in from any of those IP addresses to Microsoft 365. So Tor can be used by anybody, so that might be another slap on the wrist. But at the same time, threat actors, in this case, this one would be one where it could be a threat actor trying to use Tor to anonymize themselves before they log into 365. So this one might be a little bit more higher in severity than the last Tor one that we talked about. But yeah, still interesting just because I like it. It uses threat feeds. It's interesting tech, the way that detection is built.
Moving on into our general security news. First up, there's a pretty momentous change in the world of Windows. The blue screen of death is going away. Microsoft is releasing a fix that is going to end the appearance of blue screens of death everywhere forever because they're turning black. They are making some additional changes to the error screen prior to a forced restart to improve the resiliency of Windows. These changes are largely in response after the CrowdStrike outage that was almost exactly a year ago from the day we're recording this. There are some additional streamlining efforts, including removing the frowny face, a percentage countdown on the restart process, and shorter error messages, as well as a quick machine recovery mode to hopefully reduce downtime from similar issues as the outage. Those changes should be available later this summer. I think that some of this kind of fits into that kind of sort of fixes. There's another story that we didn't include in the full lineup for, I think, last week's on please don't delete this empty folder because it'll break your computer. Also, another story that we didn't include this week that in order to encourage use of passkeys, which are an improved or stronger authentication method, they are removing the password manager from Authenticator, which is, it may encourage more adoption of passkeys, but I don't know if that's the best way that we would want to push it. What I put in the notes is what this discussion point raises as question and response is why? It does seem a little like an anti-fix of removing it as a way to address the gap. Although this may, Jake, I know you noted that there were some things about these upcoming changes that you kind of were encouraged to see.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's plenty of negative things that we could talk about or like make fun of this too, but like focusing on some of the positive stuff, I guess it sounds like they're trying to make it more, I guess, dynamic and just so it's not just about changing the screen. I think they were trying to go for an overall like just like big shift to a new way that they're doing blue screens, and then just somewhere along the line, someone was like, "Oh, let's just make it black," or there was a long meeting and nobody could come to a decision, and someone was like, just make it black, we'll be fine. But yeah, I think. And when I say like some of the UI enhancements and it being dynamic, it looks like it's going more to that like trying to jam a few of the screens together, where it's like it actually shows you like, okay, I'm trying to recover. It shows you like a percentage of what it's trying to do, and then while it's doing all that stuff, right in the bottom is where you'll see like the actual like blue screen of death error code or whatever. So yeah, it looks like they're trying to maybe mash a few screens together to make it more efficient or whatever for whoever is actually working on the device. And I mean, the bonus is they kept it black, so you can still keep BSOD as the acronym. So for what that's worth, I guess they made the right move there.
Yeah, I was thinking of all the SEO that was gonna, it should hopefully stay the same, except for, now the Reddit post will be, what's this black screen of death, right?
I'm going to have to update my vocabulary because of the frequency that I say that I've blue screened when I've just completely short circuited on something, because before long, that's going to be as dated a reference as like Neuromancer talking about the sky being the color of a TV tuned to a dead channel. Like these things just aren't accurate anymore. So these are the things where we start to show our dinosaur hood, I think.
Well, it could go the way of X and Twitter, and everybody just agrees to keep calling it Twitter.
Yeah, right. Agreed.
Although, it is a win for dark mode people. I just have to say that. So
yeah. The black screen change definitely was recommended by a developer whose laptop has an OLED screen.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's good for laptops. Maybe there's some security benefits, but I'm gonna miss the blue. Maybe that's just the Blumira in me, but I'm gonna miss the blue.
Yeah, we are blue. We have a blue affinity, I think, definitely.
Yeah, 100%.
Another appearance from a story that we mentioned in our last episode. We talked about a disclosed Citrix vulnerability and included the note that researchers were making some comparisons to CitrixBleed, which was another much publicized vulnerability, I believe, about a year and a half ago. The story that we have this week is the now officially named CitrixBleed 2 exploits are actually out in the wild, and the register story that we use as our source here has the amazing headline, "As security researchers yell and wave their hands," which I think is a good summary of kind of the state of feeling around it. This is a vulnerability that allows the reading of session tokens or other sensitive data that is stored in memory as a result of a HTTP request with a missing login value sent to the gateway login endpoint. In this instance, the system will respond with what is currently in memory. And when what's in memory is sensitive data, that represents a pretty large issue. This has a 9.3 CVSS rating and is being tracked under CVE 2025-5777. Citrix has not been the most communicative around this, despite multiple reports of it having been exploited in the wild. They were contacted for comment on the story and so far have not. And they have released a advisory, but it is relatively light on the level of details. I wanted to include that a Watchtower researcher quoted in the story kind of points directly at this and says, that a lack of clarity and transparency and disclosure puts users in a tough position when determining, how they need to assess that risk, if they need to sound an internal alarm. So I think, this is not the first kind of repeat appearance story that we've talked about recently. Again, this is something that is, going to have a significant impact on infrastructure and is likely to be exploited for a while with a likelihood of slower patching, despite it being a relatively clear and present issue. What are some thoughts if we see severe issues like this, especially ones where a very similar vulnerability has already been disclosed and we already have seen the evidence of its exploit in the wild? Why would we continue to see this for some time?
I feel like this is why patch management programs exist. It's like you get the vulnerability and then that starts the clock. And now we're at the point of like, I hope you scheduled your downtime because this bad boy needs to be patched ASAP. And that's not easy, right? Especially with Citrix, it's just, those systems are used for business critical everyday stuff, right? Everyday access, remote, teleworking, all sorts of stuff. So yeah, definitely like, I think Citrix is being pretty quiet here because there is no workaround. And the workaround is just patch, and they know it's tough, and you just got to schedule that downtime. So yeah, try to keep ahead of this kind of stuff, right? Especially these high CVSS scores. And then, having a formal patch program where you can go, how critical is this to our business? Is this worth, patching? Maybe it's not immediate, but it's like we understand that we're putting it on the schedule, right? And getting it on that schedule and following through, because that's just how it works.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to have a high CV score. It's a whole other thing to be a known kev out in the wild being exploited, and how you manage that, how quickly you're able to manage that. That's why being an IT leader is hard.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would honestly, in 2025, I would expect, the proof of concept from a researcher, is starting the clock for in the wild, it's just how it works. So we're getting very tight on, people actually have active exploits from theoretical CVEs, unless it's something insane, but that's usually the exception.
And I feel like we have one of these, at least one example each episode, but if you are a Citrix administrator reading this or hearing this and kind of felt your stomach drop, that may be biofeedback indicating a good opportunity for building an incident response plan, maybe running a tabletop exercise. Certainly, these are not easy fixes to put into place, but that makes it all the more important to set aside some time, prioritize putting a plan in place and how you will handle that kind of downtime. Our next story up is more interesting as a trend as we see more and more searches moving from direct searches through search engines like Google to interactive chats with an LLM. Netcraft released some research that a full third, 34%, of generated URLs provided in response to questions asking for a login page resulted in inaccurate results. So basically, the researchers, without trying to subvert or manipulate the agent that they were chatting with, just straightforward, clear requests. Where is the login page for X organization? 29% of the responses were non-existent or inactive domains. 5% of the responses were valid domains, but not accurate for the login page requested. And most concerningly, one request for a Wells Fargo login page linked to an actual live phishing imitation page. So the issue it was highlighted is more likely to affect smaller organizations because there's going to be less training data available on them. We'll have a link to the full study. And I think, there's a couple questions here. One, we may have touched on this, how do you revise your security awareness training to address kind of these AI generated, I put misinformation in the notes, but I think actually just inaccurate information. What else can we be doing to try and educate users about this?
To me, this is a tough one. I kind of put this in the same bucket as like trying to train users to not click on like sponsored results, or at least know what they are. But again, that also too is a problem, and has always been a problem for the longest time. Like people or companies and even malicious actors paying for those spots and like malvertising and that kind of stuff. So this is a tough one. But I honestly have never been in the shoes of having to educate people in this way. But like that's kind of how I would like try to attack it. Is like if I've got some kind of communication that I'm already telling people like specific things about, like this is what sponsored results are, this is why they're bad, like just scroll a little bit further. Maybe we add like the same kind of information to that training, but it's just like, here's your AI generated results. Just like ignore them or take them with a grain of salt. I like one of the quotes in the article here saying that LLMs don't retrieve information, they generate it. So anytime that you're doing stuff like this, you have to be like, you have to be just extra careful. And maybe even that quote alone can make people like understand like why it's dangerous to just outright trust things that are generating things and not just retrieving it for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I always tell people that LLMs are not magic, and like they're very fallible. Right, 30% is a pretty high number for errors if you think about it in that scenario. So, like, expect less, I guess. Expect less out of your LLMs. I think this is funny because it's a little while ago we had another research paper where code gen AIs were basically making fake packages that you could, typo squat and get free code injection from LLM generating, vibe coding. So I think there's going to be a fun new category name for this. I'm voting for sloppy phishing. So it's I think
nice. I like that.
I think there's going to be basically like a bunch of attackers that realize if I can get the models to train on my version of this, we're going to start seeing more of, hey, no, this is the login page you're looking for, right? I would expect this not to get better in the short term, but hopefully in the long term, the model creators and AI companies can actually like build backend tools to fix this.
Yeah, well, and I think it's even more risky. You think about agents. Well, the agent's going to go off and run, and you're going to give the agent your login information potentially. And so if the model behind it is tricked, it's going to run all the way, and you may or may not ever be in the loop. And so that's where this stuff is going. Everyone's excited about the potential, but it goes to show the risk. And I mean, I know one of the questions that you're thinking about here is defensive domain registration. And I know there are companies out there like Blackbird AI, especially if you're really big, thinking about narrative and doing the work for you. But it just obviously, hopefully, Wells Fargo is thinking pretty aggressively about this. But in general, it's something that even mid-sized companies are going to have to start thinking about. Smaller companies are going to have to think about, because people are going to have an agent, and they're going to expect their agent to go do the thing for them. And there's going to be a site that looks like your site with one letter difference. And hopefully, if the model gets smarter, or the teams trying to protect the companies get a little bit smarter too.
One of my big pet peeves is because there's such a culture now of like searching service and then the word login, right? Because you never remember what the login page is. So delivering like just slap a login button if you're building software, just slap a login button everywhere on your site, right? I don't care where it is. If it's in a marketing article, like someone's going to land in the wrong place, and you're way better off just like giving them a button to log in instead of making them go search for the right page.
Our last story for this week, there is a report of Ingram Micro has filed an 8K with the SEC around an incident that they reported on Saturday. Customers began reporting that various Ingram Micro sites were unavailable starting on Thursday, right before the 4th of July holiday in the US on Friday. Ingram Micro has released a scant on details advisory, as well as a update page where they are continuing to post more information. I will confess I chuckled a little bit that they had on the update page assured customers they can still take subscription orders just by email or by phone right now. So they are working hard to make sure you can still give them money. Bleeping Computers coverage on this has reported it as a SafePay ransomware attack, which hasn't yet been confirmed either by Ingram Micro or by the SafePay team, which is often the case when there's a attempted extortion in the offing, right? And they noted in the article that SafePay is now one of the leading players in ransomware activity right now. In NCC Group's May Pulse report, Threat Pulse report, 18% of ransomware attacks that they were tracking led back to the Safeway group. I noticed one of the MSP contacts that they interviewed said that they were removing privileged access to their Microsoft tenant as a precautionary measure. Is that kind of a right-sized response to a as yet kind of unconfirmed severity incident? And what are some other measures or remediation steps that orgs might want to keep in mind to mitigate third-party risk from an incident like this where they don't necessarily have all of the details?
I think I love whatever this person said about removing access. That's the right decision that they made for their org, though. That's something that they should have, that hopefully they thought about before all of this happened, and then they were ready to pull the trigger. So this answer could be different for everybody. I think a majority of people, this is probably good advice. But at the same time, your risk tolerance may not be the same to this MSP's risk tolerance, and vice versa, it might be all over the place. So it's important just to think about the things before they happen. And even if you aren't affected by the Ingram Micro, like all of this is again my opportunity. I think I've said it every episode I've been on is like use this as a tabletop experience or experiment, just to like see, like maybe you don't use Ingram, but I'm sure you've got other vendors you depend on. They have data on you. They have access to your environment. What would it look like if they got compromised? And just start thinking about, like, if they got compromised, how far would I have to go before I pull the trigger and remove them from access? And what would it look like if they were compromised? What data do they have on me that might be extorted or lost? Just that kind of stuff. So again, tabletops, I love them. This is a good opportunity to be like, just think about it. Like, who is your vendors? What access do they have? And what data do they have on you? And just like document that. Keep it in your mind when stuff like this happens.
And it's worth noting that there have been a number of stories and trend reports recently highlighting that increasingly logistics and service solution providers rather are being targeted, which makes sense because, compromising one of those tools that is in use by a wide variety of organizations is a potential pivot point to try and reach all of those organizations. So it's a efficient use of the attacker's time. Certainly that doesn't mean don't use these managed solutions, but there is a cause to give a higher level of scrutiny when you're evaluating them, in the same way that, when you're looking at the assets and resources in your environment, you recognize that some of them are more at risk than others of being targeted.
Yeah, and the other thing that I just want to bring up here is when this happens, when stuff happens, it's important to recognize, okay, what are the steps you're going to take, not just from a security perspective, but just from an organizational protective nature. I think a lot about what happened with CDK and the ransomware and how that related to kind of auto dealers. And obviously that's a different type of incident. That's their central hub of information in that case. But again, anything that has that level of access, that level of insight into your environment, it's an opportunity to partner with your cyber insurer. They know about this incident. They're probably emailing you about this incident, and they would much rather that you be proactive. The insurer has a better opportunity to engage with you. A $0 claim has generally no negative impact on the organization. Not informing the insurance company, that can lead to some more challenges with your broker or with your underwriter. So it's a good opportunity to make sure you're thinking about all your resources, including your insurance in this case.
That is going to run us up on time for this week's episode. Be sure to take a look at the description. You'll find links for the articles that we talked about today. I'm also including a link to a new burnout assessment test that has been created specifically for people working in security. So you'll find that as our bonus resource in the description this week. And if you are especially tired right now or feeling that report that we talked about last time, that smaller org teams are feeling very overwhelmed, it may be worth taking a look at over lunch. Take care of yourself, not just your environment. Until we see you next, thanks for tuning in. Thanks to our panel so much for joining me. And until next time, stay safe out there, everybody. Bye-bye.